If you think modern river monsters are scary, like crocodiles, piranhas, and those weird catfish that look like failed science experiments, you are not emotionally prepared for what used to live in freshwater. Ancient rivers were not peaceful nature documentaries, they were underwater crime scenes with teeth. The kind of places where something the size of a school bus could casually swim past you and decide your bones looked crunchy. We are talking about rivers that had armored fish with guillotine jaws, crocodiles longer than a city bus, dinosaurs that treated rivers like personal fishing ponds, snakes that could hug a pickup truck to death, and saw-faced rays that looked like they were designed by a villain with a grudge. And the wild part? This is not mythology. These things left behind real fossils, real bite marks, real crushed skulls, and very real evidence that ancient rivers were basically prehistoric horror movies on a loop. So forget Nessie, forget Bigfoot, forget whatever your uncle swears he saw in a swamp once. These were the actual river monsters that ruled the earth. And honestly, it is a miracle humans showed up after they were already gone. About 370 million years ago, during the late Devonian, rivers were not gently flowing Instagram backdrops. They were industrial grade death factories, and sitting at the top of that food chain like a biological tank with anger issues was Dunkleosteus. This thing was not technically a dinosaur, not a shark, and not a crocodile. It was a placoderm fish, which is science speak for armored murder submarine with opinions. Dunkleosteus could hit lengths of 8 to 10 meters, depending on which fossils you trust, which puts it in the same emotional category as a school bus. Except this school bus had a head the size of a small car, thick bony armor plating instead of scales, and jaws that worked like a pair of hydraulic bolt cutters. It did not even bother with teeth. Why waste time growing teeth when you can evolve two massive sharpened bone plates that slam shut and shear through flesh, bone, and whatever life decisions your prey had made that morning? What makes Dunkleosteus extra unsettling is that while it is usually associated with marine environments, there is good evidence that placoderms like this didn't respect boundaries. Devonian river systems were massive, braided networks that connected directly into coastal seas, and a lot of big predators moved freely between them. So yes, this thing likely cruised into freshwater systems like it owned the place, because it did. The bite force estimates are where things stop being fun and start being personal. Researchers working on jaw mechanics calculated that Dunkleosteus could generate bite forces comparable to modern crocodiles, and possibly even greater, depending on jaw size. And unlike a croc, which grabs and death rolls, Dunkleosteus just closed its mouth and turned whatever it caught into artisanal bone fragments. Fossils of other armored fish from the same period show crushed skulls, shattered armor plates, and bite marks that line up disturbingly well with Dunkleosteus jaw dimensions. Translation: this fish was out here eating other tanks. Picture a Devonian river. The water is murky, full of drifting plant debris, schools of primitive fish, and slow-moving armored placoderms minding their business. Then this thing glides in from the gloom, its front half basically a medieval knight's helmet with fins. No warning roar, no dramatic music, just a sudden sideways lunge and a jaw snap that sounds like someone slamming a steel door shut. 1 second, your species is doing fine. The next, you are a cautionary fossil. And Dunkleosteus was not a frantic chaser. Its body shape suggests it was more of a burst ambush predator than a marathon swimmer. It didn't need to chase things across the river. It just needed one good surprise attack. This fish played the long game. Sit, drift, wait, then ruin somebody's entire evolutionary lineage. It gets worse. Dunkleosteus also likely had one of the fastest jaw-closing speeds ever recorded for a vertebrate predator. Not just strong, fast. Its jaw-opening mechanism worked like a spring-loaded trap, snapping shut before prey even had time to process that something very unfair was happening behind them. Imagine getting hit by a guillotine that learned how to swim. What really sells Dunkleosteus as a river monster is the psychological aspect. This was not some sleek, elegant predator. It looked like a boulder with fins and a bad attitude. Its head was boxy. Its eyes sat behind thick armor. Its mouth opened into a rectangular nightmare. This thing did not evolve for beauty. It evolved for efficiency. It is like evolution said, what if we make a jaw first and then build the rest of the animal around that? And yet, despite all this dominance, Dunkleosteus still managed to go extinct. Toward the end of the Devonian, ecosystems changed. Oxygen levels shifted, new predators evolved, competition increased, the old armored fish dynasty collapsed, and sharks started moving in like they were taking over a closed mall. Dunkleosteus, the once unstoppable loan shark of freshwater and coastal rivers, quietly disappeared. Which is honestly comforting, because if this thing had survived into modern times, no one would be kayaking anywhere, ever. Fast forward about 100 million years to the early Cretaceous, and rivers somehow decided they were not dangerous enough yet. Enter Sarcosuchus, also known as Super Croc, which sounds like a bad comic book villain name until you realize it was a real animal that could eat your car and still have room for dessert. Sarcosuchus lived in what is now North Africa, back when the Sahara was not a sand apocalypse, but a massive river system full of fish, turtles, dinosaurs, and extremely unfortunate life choices. Fossils from places like the Gadufawa region in Niger show a crocodilian so big it makes modern Nile crocodiles look like budget knockoffs. We are talking about an animal that could reach 11 to 12 meters in length. That is city bus territory, in crocodile form, in a river. Its skull alone was over 1.5 meters long. That is not a head, that is a weapon platform. The snout was long, wide, and reinforced, packed with thick conical teeth designed for grabbing, crushing, and not letting go. Unlike modern crocs, which tend to have narrower snouts, optimized for fish, or broader ones for generalist diets, Sarcosuchus had a ridiculous combination of both. It could eat fish, turtles, and apparently anything else dumb enough to come down to the water for a drink. And yes, that includes dinosaurs. There is direct fossil evidence of large theropods and ornithopods living in the same river systems as Sarcosuchus. No, we do not have a perfectly preserved dinosaur leg in a Sarcosuchus stomach, which would have been extremely helpful for dramatic effect. But the size, jaw structure, and ecological overlap make it very clear that this thing was not politely sticking to fish. It was an opportunist with zero respect for personal boundaries. Picture a Cretaceous riverbank. A herd of dinosaurs wanders down for a drink. They are relaxed. It is hot. Someone is complaining about the heat. Then the water explodes. A crocodile the length of a bus launches upward, clamps onto a dinosaur's face or leg, and drags it straight into the river. No warning, no second chance. Just a prehistoric hostage situation that ends badly for the dinosaur. Modern Nile crocodiles already do this to zebras and wildebeest. Sarcosuchus was that, scaled up to nightmare proportions. Its armor plating, called osteoderms, ran down its back like a medieval shield. Its body was thick, heavy, and built for ambush. This was not a pursuit predator. This was a living bear trap that happened to swim. What makes Sarcosuchus extra terrifying is how long it kept growing. Modern crocodiles slow down and mostly stop growing once they hit adulthood. Sarcosuchus apparently did not get that memo. Bone growth patterns in the fossils suggest it kept growing throughout its life, meaning older individuals just kept getting bigger and more obnoxious. If you survived one encounter with a Sarcosuchus as a young dinosaur, congratulations. The next one might be twice the size. Its snout also had a weird bulbous structure at the tip called a bulla. Scientists still argue about what it was for. Some think it helped with sound resonance. Others think it was for sexual display. Either way, it is deeply unsettling that a crocodile this large also had a decorative nose feature, like it was showing off. Rivers were the perfect killing zones for Sarcosuchus. Wide channels, muddy water, limited visibility, prey that had to come down to drink whether they liked it or not. It did not need speed. It did not need stealth. It just needed patience and gravity, and it absolutely ruled its ecosystem. There were other big predators in those rivers, including giant fish and other crocodilians, but Sarcosuchus sat at the top like a mob boss. Nothing challenged it, nothing hunted it. If you saw one, it was already too late to do anything useful about it. Eventually, climate changes and shifting river systems wiped out its habitat. The super croc's reign ended, and its descendants shrank back down into the more polite, socially acceptable crocodiles we know today, which is great, because if a 12-meter crocodile still lived in rivers, nobody would ever go near water again. If you thought dinosaurs were all about stomping around on land and roaring at the sky, Spinosaurus showed up and said, "Actually, I live in the river now." This thing was not just a dinosaur that occasionally ate fish. It was a full-time freshwater menace that treated ancient rivers like its personal buffet line. Spinosaurus lived during the late Cretaceous, about 100 million years ago, in what is now North Africa. Back then, this region was not desert. It was a vast network of rivers, floodplains, mangrove-style swamps, and shallow coastal lagoons. Basically, it was prehistoric Florida, except everything could kill you. Fossils from places like Morocco and Egypt reveal a predator that broke all the classic dinosaur rules. First, the size. Spinosaurus may have been the longest theropod dinosaur ever discovered, reaching around 15 meters in length. That is longer than Tyrannosaurus rex. It also had that ridiculous sail on its back, made of elongated neural spines, which still has scientists arguing about whether it was for display, thermoregulation, or just dramatic flair. But the real horror feature was its head. Spinosaurus had a long, narrow snout lined with straight, conical teeth. Not the steak knife teeth you see on land predators. These were fish-grabbing teeth. Think giant gharial on steroids. Its jaws were built for snapping shut around slippery prey and not letting go. Fossilized stomach contents and isotopic analysis of its bones confirm it was eating fish regularly, including massive ones like Mawsonia, which we will get to later. This was not a land predator that dipped into water occasionally. This thing was built for aquatic life. And the bones tell the story. Spinosaurus had unusually dense bones, especially in its limbs. That is not an accident. Dense bones act like ballast, helping animals stay submerged. Modern aquatic animals like penguins and hippos have similar adaptations. It also had short hind legs and a long, flexible tail shaped like a paddle. When scientists reconstructed that tail, they realized Spinosaurus could actually swim with it, generating thrust like a crocodile or a giant salamander. So yes, a swimming dinosaur in a river. Let that emotionally sink in. Picture a Cretaceous river channel. Giant coelacanths drift lazily through the water. Schools of fish scatter around submerged logs. A turtle the size of a coffee table basks near the bank. And then something big moves beneath the surface. A long snout breaks the waterline. A sudden sideways snap. A fish vanishes in a splash. And the river just goes back to pretending nothing terrifying just happened. Spinosaurus probably spent most of its time patrolling riverbanks and shallow waters, picking off fish, turtles, and anything else that wandered too close to the edge. And while it was not built for high-speed land chases, it did not need to be. A lot of dinosaurs came to rivers to drink. That alone is a buffet strategy. There is also evidence that Spinosaurus might have been a bully to other predators. In the same ecosystems lived giant theropods like Carcharodontosaurus, which were more traditionally land-based, but Spinosaurus carved out its own niche. It owned the water. If you were a dinosaur that needed to cross a river or take a drink, there was a very real chance you were about to become an unscheduled meal. What makes Spinosaurus especially chaotic is how much we are still learning about it. Its original fossils were destroyed in World War II. Every new skeleton discovery changes how it is reconstructed. For decades, artists showed it like a regular dinosaur with a sail. Now it looks more like a semi-aquatic predator that evolution accidentally gave a heavy metal hairstyle. And the sail itself? Still a mystery. It could have been for display, temperature control, species recognition, or intimidation. Imagine seeing that thing rising out of the river, sail first, like some prehistoric boss fight introduction. Spinosaurus was not the king of the land. It did not need to be. It was the tyrant of the rivers. While other dinosaurs were fighting over territory on land, Spinosaurus was out here inventing a whole new horror genre. Eventually, like all good river monsters, it vanished. Climate changes, shifting ecosystems, and the end of the Cretaceous wiped out its habitat and food sources. But for millions of years, if you were in an African river, Spinosaurus was the reason the water felt wrong. While Spinosaurus was busy turning rivers into personal fishing ponds, something even more unsettling was cruising through those same waters like a prehistoric vacuum cleaner with commitment issues. Meet Mawsonia, a giant freshwater coelacanth that proves rivers did not need speed demons to be terrifying. Sometimes all you need is a slow-moving armored fish the size of a bus that eats whatever fits in its mouth. Mawsonia lived from the Jurassic into the Cretaceous about 180 to 90 million years ago, and its fossils have been found all over Africa and South America. That already tells you something weird was going on, because coelacanths today are deep-sea introverts that live in caves and hate attention. Mawsonia, on the other hand, said, "No thanks, I'll take warm, murky rivers full of dinosaurs." And it got big. Estimates put Mawsonia at around 5 to 6 meters long. That is longer than a modern great white shark. In freshwater, casually drifting through rivers like it forgot to check its own size before leaving the house. This thing did not look like a normal fish. It had thick, heavy scales that acted like natural armor. Its body was chunky and stiff. Its fins were fleshy and lobed, more like primitive limbs than modern fish fins. And its head was broad and flat, with a mouth designed not for elegant biting, but for industrial scale suction. Mawsonia was a vacuum feeder. It would open its mouth suddenly and create a pressure drop that sucked in fish, invertebrates, and basically anything unlucky enough to be nearby. It did not need to chase prey. It just had to get close, open wide, and let physics do the rest. Imagine a school bus-sized shop vacuum drifting toward you in a river. That is not a fight you win. What makes this worse is that Mawsonia shared rivers with Spinosaurus. Fossil evidence suggests Spinosaurus ate coelacanths, including Mawsonia. So yes, there were rivers where a swimming dinosaur was hunting a bus-sized armored fish. That is not an ecosystem. That is a gladiator arena. Picture a slow, murky river channel. Logs float on the surface. The water is thick with plant debris. Mawsonia drifts along near the bottom, barely moving its fins, just existing like a sentient submarine. A smaller fish swims too close. The mouth opens. The fish disappears. No chase, no drama, just gone. Now imagine Spinosaurus sliding into the same river. It spots Mawsonia. It lunges. Mawsonia panics, or at least does whatever the coelacanth version of panic is, which is probably mild annoyance. It tries to turn. It is not fast. It was never meant to be fast. It was built for durability and ambush survival, not cardio. We do not have a perfectly preserved Spinosaurus versus Mawsonia fossil, but isotopic analysis of Spinosaurus bones and associated fish fossils strongly suggest that giant coelacanths were on the menu, which means somewhere in the Cretaceous, a swimming dinosaur bit into a prehistoric living submarine and decided it was edible. Modern coelacanths like Latimeria are often called living fossils because they barely changed in 400 million years. They live in deep sea caves and mind their business. Mawsonia was their overconfident cousin who went outside and paid the price. It survived for tens of millions of years, but eventually, changing river systems, climate shifts, and new predators wiped it out. And this is the part that really messes with your sense of scale. We think of coelacanths as rare, weird, deep-sea fish that barely reach 2 meters. But for most of their history, some of them were absolute units cruising through rivers like they were late for a dentist appointment. Mawsonia did not need claws. It did not need sharp teeth. It did not need speed. It just needed a mouth, a pressure differential, and bad luck on your part. It is proof that not all river monsters were flashy killers. Some of them were just big, quiet, and extremely inconvenient to be near. And honestly, if you fell into one of those rivers and saw a 6-meter coelacanth drifting towards you like a haunted log, you would not even have time to process how weird your death was about to be. If everything so far felt too aquatic and not emotionally suffocating enough, the Paleocene decided to fix that by inventing Titanoboa. This was not a cute, oversized snake. This was a 13 to 14 meter long constrictor that lived in swampy rivers and basically turned freshwater into a slow motion horror movie. Titanoboa lived about 60 million years ago, not long after the dinosaurs went extinct, in what is now Colombia. Back then, the region was a hot, humid, tropical swamp forest with massive rivers winding through thick vegetation, the kind of place where the air feels heavy, the water is opaque, and you just know something with bad intentions is watching you you. Fossils from the Karajan Formation include massive vertebrae that belong to a snake so large it makes modern anacondas look like novelty ropes. These vertebrae are not slightly bigger than modern snakes, they are absurdly bigger. Each one looks like it came from a different, angrier dimension. Based on those bones, scientists estimate Titanoboa was about 42 to 45 feet long and weighed over a ton. That is longer than a city bus. As a snake in a river, and it lived in water. Titanoboa was semi-aquatic, similar to modern anacondas. It spent a lot of time in rivers and swamps, using the water to support its massive weight. On land, it would have been slow and awkward. In water, it became a floating death coil with zero sympathy. What did it eat? Pretty much whatever it wanted. Fossils from the same formation include giant turtles like Carbonomes, which had shells over 1.7 meters long, and large crocodilians. Titanoboa almost certainly preyed on both. Imagine being a crocodile and getting ambushed by a snake bigger than your boat. That is not a fair fight. That is a resignation letter. Titanoboa killed like modern constrictors, but scaled up to nightmare levels. It would grab prey with its jaws, wrap its coils around the body, and squeeze. Not crush. Squeeze. Each breath the prey took would make the coils tighten a little more. Blood flow would stop. Consciousness would fade. And the snake would just patiently wait for physics to do its thing. The constriction force estimates are disturbing. Based on its size and muscle mass, Titanoboa could generate pressure far beyond anything seen in modern snakes. If it wrapped around a human, which thankfully never happened, it would be over before your brain finished screaming. Picture a Paleocene swamp river. The water is brown and still. A crocodile slides into the river, looking for fish. The surface ripples slightly. Something thick moves beneath the water. Suddenly, a coil the width of a tree trunk erupts upward and wraps around the crocodile's body. The water explodes. There is thrashing, then silence. The river goes back to pretending nothing horrifying just occurred, and Titanoboa did not need to rush. After killing something, it could swallow it whole and then not eat again for weeks or months. This snake was not chasing prey all day. It was running a slow, efficient ambush operation. Here is the weird climate science part that somehow makes it worse. Titanoboa could only exist because the Earth was warmer than it is today. Reptiles are cold-blooded. To grow that big, you need high average temperatures year-round. So the planet literally had to be hotter to support a snake this obnoxious. Which means Titanoboa is not just a river monster. It is a climate artifact, a physical reminder that when the Earth gets warmer, reptiles start auditioning for kaiju movies. Eventually, global temperatures dropped. The swamp forest changed, Titanoboa's ecosystem collapsed, and the largest snake to ever exist quietly vanished into the fossil record. Which is honestly the best possible ending for this story, because if a 14-meter semi-aquatic constrictor still lived in modern rivers, nobody would ever go swimming again. Ever. Just when you think rivers had peaked in creative ways to terrify every living thing, evolution threw in Onchopristis, the freshwater sawfish that makes every modern fish look like a polite suggestion. This was the Cretaceous equivalent of a chainsaw with fins, cruising murky rivers and turning schools of fish into abstract art. Onchopristis lived about 100 million years ago in African river systems, fossils showing it thrived in what would become Niger and Morocco. It could reach lengths of 5 to 6 meters. That's not a casual swim. That's a mobile, blade-wielding threat gliding through the water slowly and purposefully. Its signature feature? A long, tooth-studded rostrum that looks like someone took a saw and stuck it to a fish's face. And yes, it was fully functional. Every tooth along that saw could slice through prey, stir up sediment to uncover hidden fish, or defend itself from overconfident predators. Modern sawfish already give a little existential dread. Onchopristis took it to the next level. With teeth along its rostrum about the size of small daggers, it could slash fish, dismember smaller aquatic creatures, and probably leave a literal signature on any poor creature that crossed paths. Fossil evidence supports this. Bite and slash marks on smaller fish and turtle fossils line up perfectly with Onchopristis' saw. It was not a fast swimmer like a shark. Speed was unnecessary. It relied on stealth, ambush, and the sheer psychological terror of its design. Imagine drifting through a river, thinking everything is fine, when suddenly the water explodes around you as a saw slams through the surface, teeth flashing. That is not a brush with nature, that is nature's passive-aggressive personality on full display. Onchopristis wasn't just scary looking, it was well armored too. Its body had thick scales and reinforced cartilage, allowing it to survive attacks from predators like giant crocodilians or opportunistic theropods. It could shrug off bites that would cripple smaller fish. Evolution basically handed it a mobile shield and a chainsaw for dessert. And yes, it was freshwater. No need to imagine escaping to the ocean. Onchopristis thrived in the murky rivers and deltas that were rich hunting grounds. These rivers were slow-moving, teeming with prey, and full of cover for ambush attacks. Perfect conditions for a sawfish that essentially turned ambushing into an art form. It's worth noting that Onchopristis also demonstrates how bizarre river ecosystems could get. We tend to think of Cretaceous rivers as crowded with dinosaurs, fish, and turtles. But here's a fish that had an actual melee weapon on its face, competing for territory and prey with crocodilians and even juvenile Spinosaurus. Talk about niche domination. Why did Onchopristis disappear? Like most Cretaceous river monsters, climate shifts, river course changes, and competition eventually led to extinction. Modern sawfish are their distant relatives, smaller and much tamer, which is good for anyone who wants to keep all their limbs intact while swimming. Still, just picture it. A 6-meter freshwater sawfish, stalking silently, saw teeth glinting, moving with slow inevitability toward anything dumb enough to swim by. That is not just survival, that is psychological warfare. Rivers were the original arenas for evolutionary horror stories, and Onchopristis is a perfect example of how rivers didn't need dinosaurs to be terrifying. By the Miocene, rivers had already hosted some of the most absurdly dangerous creatures imaginable. And just when you think things might be calming down, along came megapiranha. Forget the tiny, jaw-snapping piranhas you hear about in the Amazon today. This was a prehistoric river predator that redefined bite your arm off and keep swimming. Megapiranha lived around 8 to 10 million years ago in South America, in river systems that were warm, slow, and packed with prey. Fossils reveal jawbones that are massive compared to modern piranhas, indicating an estimated body length of 1 meter. Yes, that is longer than a human toddler, and in piranha terms, enormous. But the jaw mechanics are the real nightmare. Teeth arranged in a zigzag pattern that could crush bone and shred flesh with a single bite. Its bite force estimates range between 400 and 1,000 newtons, enough to snap the leg of a smaller vertebrate like a crocodilian hatchling, or tear through thick scales of armored fish. What makes megapiranha terrifying is that it wasn't just a swarm predator like modern piranhas, which gives humans the comforting idea of they attack together. This one could operate solo. One fish could take out prey all by itself. Fossil evidence suggests megapiranha could bite through armored fish, leaving distinctive wedge-shaped marks on bones. Basically prehistoric graffiti that says, "I ate this, deal with it." Picture a Miocene river. Muddy, slow-moving, filled with logs and swaying aquatic plants. Small fish dart around nervously. A solitary megapiranha drifts into position, silently calculating. Then it strikes. One bite, precise, crushing. A fish vanishes. No chase, no drama. The river just absorbs the loss and continues flowing, unaware of the subtle terror beneath the surface. It is efficiency meets nightmare biology. Megapiranha's teeth are another point of fascination. Scientists reconstructed its jaw and realized that the teeth formed a continuous cutting surface, almost like a chainsaw blade of living teeth. This is not something designed for grazing. This is something designed for destruction. And because the teeth interlocked perfectly, it could maintain a crushing grip, preventing prey from wriggling free. Unlike modern piranhas, which often nibble frenetically, megapiranha delivered a single, devastating strike. And yet, despite its fearsome appearance and bite, megapiranha went extinct. Environmental changes, competition, and river ecosystem shifts likely wiped it out. Modern piranhas survived, but we are left with the tiny, comparatively polite versions. Your ankles are safe, mostly. But for millions of years, South American rivers had a predator that could single-handedly terrorize an entire shoal. The psychological terror of megapiranha is subtle but powerful. Unlike massive crocodiles, huge sawfish, or semi-aquatic dinosaurs, this was a smaller predator that packed an outsized punch. Its size was deceptive, its bite was brutal, and it's a reminder that river monsters don't need to be enormous to rule their domain. Sometimes, sheer bite efficiency and terrifying jaw mechanics are enough. So next time someone casually mentions piranhas in a river, remind them, their ancestors were literal nightmares. Megapiranha may have been gone for millions of years, but it set the standard for freshwater horror long before humans even existed. By this point, it should be clear that ancient rivers were not places to picnic, fish, or casually dip a toe in. They were evolutionary testing grounds for absolute chaos, where size, armor, jaws, and sheer patience determined survival. So why did rivers, of all places, produce such a spectacular lineup of predators? Let's break it down. First, ancient rivers were enormous. Some of the Cretaceous river systems in Africa and South America were wider and deeper than anything we have today, stretching hundreds of kilometers with floodplains and deltas that offered endless niches. This meant rivers could support multiple top predators at the same time, each specializing in different hunting strategies. You could have a Spinosaurus fishing like a reptilian bear, a Titanoboa squeezing crocodiles into oblivion, and giant coelacanths slowly cruising below. And they all had enough space and food to coexist. Modern rivers, by comparison, are narrow, shallow, and highly competitive. There isn't room for city bus-sized sawfish or snakes longer than most boats. Next, oxygen and temperature played a massive role. During the Paleocene and Cretaceous, the Earth was much warmer than it is today, especially in the tropics. Warm water allows cold-blooded animals to grow bigger because their metabolism can keep up. That's why Titanoboa could reach over 13 meters. A modern anaconda could never get that size in today's Amazon. Similarly, Devonian rivers had oxygen-rich waters that allowed armored fish like Dunkleosteus to thrive and maintain high activity levels without constantly running out of energy. Another factor was the abundance of prey. Rivers were chock full of fish, amphibians, turtles, smaller crocodilians, and juvenile dinosaurs. Prey diversity meant predators could specialize without starving. Megapiranha didn't need to compete with a Spinosaurus. It had its own shoals of fish. Sarcosuchus didn't need to hunt the armored coelacanths. It could ambush dinosaurs coming to drink. Evolution essentially turned rivers into premium predator real estate. Then there's the arms race. When you have multiple giant predators in the same ecosystem, natural selection doesn't mess around. Armor gets thicker, jaws get stronger, teeth get sharper, and ambush strategies get deadlier. That's why Dunkleosteus had hydraulic jaw plates instead of teeth, why Onchopristis evolved a saw for a face, and why Mawsonia developed armored scales. Each predator had to outdo not just its prey, but its competition. Rivers were evolutionary pressure cookers, and don't underestimate the psychological component. Murky water, limited visibility, and floating debris made stalking easier and escapes harder. Prey had to come to the river to drink, spawn, or feed, creating predictable points for ambush. Every creature from small fish to giant dinosaurs had to negotiate these unpredictable death zones, which meant rivers were essentially ancient horror arenas. Finally, climate shifts and changing river courses explain why these monsters no longer exist. As continents drifted, temperatures dropped, and ecosystems changed, many of the rivers shrank, dried, or otherwise lost the capacity to support city bus-sized predators. Only the smaller, more adaptable descendants survived, which is why modern rivers have crocodiles, piranhas, and catfish, but thankfully no Spinosaurus casually fishing next to your canoe. So the takeaway is simple. Ancient rivers were like nature's extreme reality show. They were massive, warm, oxygen-rich, prey-packed, and brutally selective. They favored monsters, slow or fast, armored or toothy, aquatic or semi-aquatic. Evolution experimented with every possible lethal design, and the fossils we find today are proof that rivers once ruled the earth with teeth, jaws, coils, and saws. Ancient rivers were not playgrounds. They were arenas, laboratories, and murder factories all at once. And if you ever find yourself near a modern river, just remember, it could have been a whole lot worse. So, there you have it. Rivers weren't just waterways, they were full-on monster zones. From Dunkleosteus with its hydraulic jaws to Titanoboa squeezing crocodiles like stress balls, and Spinosaurus turning the river into its personal fishing pond, ancient freshwater ecosystems were basically a prehistoric horror show. Even slower predators like Mawsonia or the stealthy Onchopristis prove that rivers didn't need speed or firepower to be terrifying, just size, patience, and the right anatomy. Each fossil we uncover tells a story of survival, strategy, and some seriously unlucky prey. Now it's your turn. Which river monster freaked you out the most? Have you ever been near a river or swamp and felt that tiny shiver of something's lurking? Drop your thoughts and experiences in the comments. I genuinely want to hear them. And if you enjoyed diving into the deadliest rivers Earth ever produced, make sure you like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Every subscription helps keep these ancient creatures alive in our imagination, and I'll personally make sure you're the first to get every wild, jaw-dropping story we dig up next. Don't forget, the past is full of surprises, and rivers were its playground. Comment, connect, and stay curious, because the monsters we'll meet next might make even Titanoboa look like a goldfish.